it's great to be back at the Historical Society. I always enjoy coming to you. I welcome questions, comments, corrections, so please feel free to catch my attention as I go. Can you all hear me okay? Good, thank you. Oh, and thank you. Thank you, Ed. Well, picturing America. America's art in many ways tells America's story. Its landscape, its people, its highs, its lows. And that's my story today. I'm going to go more or less chronologically, starting with the people who were here before any Europeans came, then looking at art that is influenced by European traditions, and finally getting to art that challenges those traditions. So let's begin with these two pots that are in the shape of human heads. They each have red paint on them. They have incisions that probably represent tattoos. If not tattoos, then face painting. They're distinctive uh, incisions. They have holes in their ears, probably for earrings, distinctive features. Many of them were found in grave sites on the lower Mississippi, made about 600 years ago. They probably represent leaders, important leaders, and they've been buried so that those leaders will continue to use their spiritual powers to help the living. The only things that survive from that long ago are things made of clay or stone. They have to be very good materials, strong materials in our climate. But if I go, oh, by the way, this one is in the DIA. So hope you come see it. This is also in the DIA, but it's about 100 years old, carved out of wood, cottonwood, and then painted with pigments, with colors that come from seeds or berries to represent a kachina. There are hundreds of kachinas who visit the Hopi and the Zuni peoples in the desert Southwest each year, bringing good things, good health, well-being, or in the case of the Hemis kachina, bringing rain and fertility for their crops. So if you look at the headdress that the little doll is wearing, it's zigzagged like lightning around the edge. And if you look at the very bottom of the top bit, you'll see vertical lines, vertical black lines like the rain. And they're upright pieces too that represent fertility. We're making these dolls for the children so that they learn about their culture. They learn to recognize 1,000 different kachinas so that when the festivals come and the men dress as the dolls, they know who's who and they know their stories. We have at the DI at the moment a really beautiful exhibition. I left some flyers for it on the table as you came in. Has anyone seen it? Yeah. The sewing they did with porcupine quills, I don't know if everybody heard you, beautiful. So don't miss the things as you first come in. There are some in traditional ways, like they're two beautiful birch bark canoes. There are birch bark baskets. There's beading. There's all sorts of things. There are also paintings, and there are videos of the artists telling you about their work and their stories. When Europeans first came, they weren't into art. The Puritans felt it was superfluous and inappropriate. But as a middle-class merchant class grew up, they too wanted to preserve their culture, show their status. And you begin to get portraits done. So here's the portrait of Mrs. Freak. She's dressed in a gorgeous lace collar. She has jet beads around her wrists. She's got lovely embroidery on her red underskirt. This is one of the very first portraits done in America. We don't know who. Artists They weren't really artists, they were painters. They went from town to town, painting walls, painting signs, painting carriages. Once in a while, they might get a commission for a portrait. Whoever it was came in 1671 and painted Mrs. Freak and Mr. Freak. He came back 4 years later, 3 years later, baby Mary had been born. So he added her to the picture. And he probably updated the fashions that Mrs. Freak is wearing. Perhaps he gave her those red and black ribbons on her sleeve. You notice the fine carved chair she's sitting on, and that bit of fabric in the corner. The aristocratic paintings in Europe always had fabric to kind of aggrandize the sitter, to make them look more special. 1600s, if you think about Rembrandt, that's what's going on in art. In Europe, this might look a little stiff and unreal by comparison, but there are no art schools in America. There's very little that they can learn from. 100 years later, portraits are still the major type of paintings done in America. But the artists, and particularly Copley here, have learned a lot. Look at the shadows in his sleeve. Look at the reflections on that mahogany table or in the silver teapot. There are windows reflected, but there are also the hands of the silversmith who's holding his teapot. Copley could do those status pictures too of fine aristocratic looking people. The wealthy thought of themselves as the aristocrats of the New World. But this is a really down-to-earth American picture of a craftsman who's proud of his work. He's in his shirt sleeves, thinking about what he should engrave on that teapot. He's got his engraving tools on the table in front of him. And indeed, it is the Paul Revere you hear about in your history books, but several years before he did that big ride to say the British were coming. He was already a member of the Sons of Liberty, though. He's about 33 here and a friend of John Singleton Copley. Copley also did this painting of his 16-year-old half-brother, who's kind of dreamily looking off into the distance as he plays with that gold chain attached to a squirrel, an American flying squirrel. Look at the way the silk, that pink silk of his collar, you can tell it's silk, can't you? It's not velvet. And the curtain this time is rather more splendid, and probably not something he was looking at when he's looking at his brother. He's put in a glass of water on that table, showing transparency like that, is showing off his skills. Get you a little closer, because that squirrel's gorgeous, isn't he? Look at his eye, how real that looks too. And the way that table seems to project into our space. Copley sent this picture to an exhibition in London at the Royal Academy, and the head of the Academy wrote to him saying, yes, he had talent, but he better leave Boston soon before his taste gets corrupted. He wasn't too keen on leaving Boston. He was actually one of the very first artists, if not the first in America, to make a living just doing fine art. And his wife had good connections among the rich people. He came from a family of poor Irish immigrants, but his wife was better connected. In fact, her father was the agent for the East India Company, whose tea got dropped into Boston Harbor. So when the war seemed inevitable with England, Copley and his family left, never to return. History got more interesting to Americans as they became a bit more nationalistic after the British burned the capital. John Trumbull was commissioned to do big paintings for the rotunda of the new dome. So here he's showing the 5-man drafting committee of for the Declaration of Independence. presenting their declaration to the head of the Constitutional Congress. Trumbull had trained in England and come back wanting to do history paintings. They were the highest rank of paintings in Europe. So as people came through his town of Philadelphia, he did portraits of them. So 48 of the people in there were all drawn from life originally. I'll get you a bit closer to the drafting committee, though, because you probably recognize some of them. Who's the tallest one? Thomas Jefferson, right? And next to him, over on the far side from me, Benjamin Franklin. And here's John Adams. And then there's, does anybody know the other two? Yes, Roger Sherman and Robert Livingstone. You're really good historians, yes. And if you manage to have still a $2 bill, of course, you'll see this painting reproduced, or part of it, on the back of the bill. This is perhaps the most famous of all American history paintings, a 21-foot long image of George Washington crossing the Delaware. Emanuel Lurtzer, who painted it, came as a baby to America, but he went back to train in Germany, and Munich training was to get everything looking really real. So he took a lot of trouble over the costumes that people were wearing to get that right. Look how cold that ice looks. Doesn't that look really like ice? There are people there trying to push it away so the boats can get through as Washington's trying to cross the Delaware over to Trenton, New Jersey to to fight the Hessians who are there late on Christmas Eve. It might all look right, except to me, I don't think George Washington would have stood up in a boat about to hit the ice. But isn't that how you want to see your leader? Looking intrepid with the light of the heavens on him as he's facing typical odds. Though, of course, it was a battle that was one of the first major battles the Americans won. 165, 200, I've forgotten how many years. My arithmetic's not up to it. But the boat was rocked later, and I'm going out of my chronology to show you a work by Robert Colescott, where he's replaced George Washington by George Washington Carver, who was the first Black American to appear in American textbooks. And he's given him a cast of characters, a very stereotypical looking, the fisherman, the cook, the banjo player, the drunk, the mammy, and even the monkey. He's trying to make the point, as he calls it, a page from an American history book, the paucity of Black American figures in American history books, even though they fought in that Revolutionary War. And when they do appear in art, how degraded or denigrated they look in the pictures. But history isn't really a popular subject in America. America's not about the past. We don't have a huge past here. It's about the future. So for Americans, the landscape came to be something they identified with. The landscape is immense, it's strong, it's rugged, like the American character. And many landscape paintings show you that immense size. It's really striking, even coming when I did in the 60s. The landscape is so huge. You can be looking for a little person to give you that sense of scale, because American landscapes usually have that. But he's doing something different, Thomas Cole. He was the first American artist to really make a living doing landscapes. So most of his landscapes are smaller than this one. It's about 6 feet across, because he's telling a big story here. On the right, he's showing the land, peaceful, calm, fields and little trees, the blue sky and the sun over it, the slow-running river causing that oxbow. Down in the lower right-hand corner, there's a ferry going across. But on this side of the picture, it's quite different. You're looking at a rugged forest, unspoiled forest, with a storm clouds. You can't see into the distance. There's storm clouds. There's streaks of lightning coming down. And although the sun is capturing the trees in the foreground, some of them look as if they've already been hit by lightning. If you go to the landscape gallery in the DIA, you'll see they nearly all follow a formula where you have trees usually or rocks framing the picture, you have water in the middle ground, you have distant blue mountains. That was how a landscape was supposed to look in European painting. And they nearly always also have a dead tree, that sense of the cycle of life. This is still a rather romantic period where death and strong feelings come to the fore. Cole is trying to point out how different the American landscape is from Europe. He grew up in England. His father was a mill owner, so he lived among the dark satanic mills. He knew those dirty skies and dirty cities and the deforested landscape. His, farm spread across the country, but leaves some of that wilderness, the pristine Eden that Americans think of as God-given. I don't know if you found the man. I'll get you a little closer and I'll circle him, because here's our artist. He's at his easel, but he's turned with that yellow hat. He's looking at you, looking at him and that vast landscape. As Americans spread the frontier to the west, people on the east loved to see paintings of the frontier, but paintings of a frontier that is peaceful and tamed, like this painting. It might look familiar to some of you, because we have a somewhat similar one in the DIA, rather smaller, done a few years later. The fur traders are just slowly going down the river with their bundle of furs, and there's an animal there who's chained to the prow of the boat. He's almost representing the tamed wilderness, the peaceful, now peaceful wilderness that the Easterners like to think about. It's a very quiet painting, still painting, isn't it? It's got a lot of vertical lines from the animal to the boy to the man looking out forwards at you. They're calm lines, as is the horizontal lines of the canoe and the water, and that rosy dawn as they're just floating down. Get you a little bit closer. The boy is leaning over the bale of furs that's been covered with some leather. There's a dead duck on it with a spot of blood. I'm rather glad the DIA version doesn't have a dead duck. But there's the whole painting for you again. As people spread further and further west, when the artists wanted to show the landscape without a lot of human content, they had to go further west too. And one of the first ones to go all the way across to the Pacific with an expedition was Albert Bierstadt. And here he's painting the mountains framing the view on one side, the trees on the other. He doesn't have a person for scale, but he's got the deer that have come out of the forest to drink at that pure water, and ducks that are on the water, some of them flying off it. That glassy surface, reflecting the mountains, reflecting that waterfall. The Sierra Mountains. Artists at this time didn't paint out in the landscape. They did drawings and then came back to their studios to organize what they had into a landscape painting. And you might look at this landscape. Have you ever seen mountains like those ones in the distance in America. No, that's because he also used some of his landscapes from his drawings from the Swiss Alps. Uh, but you've got a light of God coming down on that glassy lake. And one critic realized it looks like it was fake, but he said, if this isn't how America looks, it's how it should look. And there was a growing feeling in America that it was a God-given land, that the Europeans had a manifest destiny to spread across it. A newspaper man called John O'Sullivan publicized that phrase, a manifest destiny, to spread the land with our ever-growing millions. And the millions were growing. In 1800, there were 4 million people in the US. By 1860, there were 31 million. They were growing. The painting shows them coming from the bright lit East, the enlightened East, by train, by wagon train, by horse, the farmers, the miners, pushing in front of them the buffalo and the Americans, the Native Americans. Flying over it all, and because she's a somewhat undressed character, you're meant to understand that it's an allegorical character. She's got a star in her head. She's the spirit of America, or the spirit of that manifest destiny. She's unraveling the telegraph wire as she goes and holding a school book. Well, by the time Nast was painting this in 1872, that very racist, idealistic view of America had really had a big jolt, and that was the Civil War. There were 300 photographers, or 300 or so, photographing the Civil War. They couldn't photograph battles, film speeds weren't fast enough yet, but they photographed the aftermath like this, the corpses. I can take you closer to those because you can see they're Union soldiers who've had their boots stolen and their pockets picked. Even before Photoshop, and let alone before AI, you couldn't always believe what you see in photographs. Of course, the photographer always has his own point of view, but the Civil War photographers weren't averse to moving corpses to get a better picture. Artists also painted Civil War images. Church is a landscape artist, so he's got his dead tree, he's got his trees framing the painting, he's got water, and he's got the distant blue mountain. But his dead tree has an eagle flying over it, and the sunrise kind of opens near the top of the tree to see the stars through on the blue sky. It's an American flag flying in the dawn's early light. It was seen by Americans as a great image of hope there. Many of them sent postcards with this reproduced on it to families who had people, or even to soldiers at the front. Others showed, both in their photographs and in this later painting, the boredom in the camp, or in this case, I don't think he's bored. He's looking down, the fire in front of him, the dawn is rising, he's got a new battle to fight. He's thinking about the future, or maybe he's thinking about the lady he left behind, because this is one of a whole series where the man who modeled for the Union officer was actually the brother-in-law of the artist. And so one of the first ones shows him saying goodbye to his lady. He was one of the lucky ones. He was wounded in the war, but he survived and became the model for this series. After the war, Winslow Homer, who from the age of 25 was embedded with the armies and sent images and writing back for Harper's Magazine. After the war, he painted this. It looks a very simple painting, but there's the man dressed still in his army uniform. His canteen and his jacket are down in the lower right. There was a concern in America about how all the veterans could be reintegrated into society. And this is showing he's cast his sword into plowshares, as it were. But he's got a sickle, not a sickle, scythe, that was the word I was looking for. He's got a scythe and he's cutting down the wheat. In fact, he's using, if you look really closely, he's using one of the very modern scythes with extra blades to them. But because you really see that front blade, it's a reminder of the Grim Reaper and the number of people whose lives have been cut short, like the grain here. It's a veteran in a new field, reminding you, though, of the old field of battle. Most of Homer's paintings, though, after the war were rather nostalgic. Like this one, the nostalgia was already beginning for the little red schoolhouses. Their days were ending. Things had changed in America because of the war. The men went off to fight. Women became the teachers. And that made the educational process far looser. So you see the young boys coming out. They've got a lunch break and they can go play in their bare feet on the field. Did any of you ever play Snap the Whip? I hadn't heard of it, but it looks like a fun game. You've got the two at the end who are anchoring it, and they run in a big circle. And as they run, the ones at the end have to go run faster, and they fall off the end.
I remember doing it.
Oh, good. I thought somebody would. Yeah. They're also, these young boys are the future. They're the optimistic. Now the war is over. America can grow again. And they are the future. Artists in America began going to Europe to study in much bigger numbers after the Civil War. Some of them stayed. Some of them came back to paint America. Thomas Eakins was one who came back and who brought the style that he'd learned in Europe of, they called it realism. He's doing a painting here of surgery at the Jefferson Medical College in Philadelphia. He'd actually studied anatomy there himself before he became an art professor. As a rather bloody scene of a patient here you can see the little gray socks that he's wearing, and then his leg goes round, and the man in the middle front is holding his leg. He's a charity case, doing it so that all the students you see up and above can learn. Thomas Eakins is doing it to show American developments. The surgeon here has developed a way of curing osteomyelitis, a dead bone disease. It's called the Gross Clinic, not because the blood is all rather gross, but because the surgeon is Dr. Samuel Gross, who volunteered his time, but he's got his bloody fingers there. The man lower right is holding the incision open. The surgeon in the middle is probing the bone. And then the one at the end is the anesthetist. Do you notice how the looks of the surgeons, their arms, all lead you to that incision? Even the parting on the head of the anesthetist holding his cotton soaked in chlorophyll. The mother of the patient can't bear to look. And indeed, the jury to whom he submitted this for an exhibition in Philadelphia, they also couldn't bear to look, and they didn't accept it. But he he is showing you the real. And you'll excuse the pun, he's giving us a slice of life. This is life too. I think his grandfather and his grandson saying grace, they're thankful, sitting in a plain room with very little on their table. It's one of the very first, if not the first, images of Black Americans shown with dignity and empathy by an artist who had trained under the previous artist, but left America when he was 30, saying he couldn't paint and fight prejudice at the same time. He went over to Paris, where Black Americans were much more welcomed and accepted. But he made one trip back to America where he painted this painting and one other of the grandfather teaching the little boy to play the banjo. That America's not really about poverty. America's about wealth, money, as you can see. And there's all sorts of money stuck on this old door. There's colonial money at the top. I'll get you a bit closer to it in a minute. A brand new silver $5 bill. Stamps that during the Civil War were used as currency. And the presidents of the US carved all around that old door. I just wonder, do you see that little bit of white paper at the bottom of the door? I'd love to open the door and see what's written on it. But if I get you close, you can't open the door. It's been nailed shut with that say to head. There's a photograph up there of a woman. It's got a little bent on the corner. The magnifying glass is broken. The bills get more and more damaged as they get older and older. The work is called Changes of Time. I nearly said the painter, but it is all paint. Everything you're looking at is paint, and it's an actual size. So when you see it, when they displayed it, it has to be behind glass, because otherwise people just can't resist trying to take the money off. It looks so real. Under that magnifying glass, and it's legible, is a cutting from a newspaper saying how wonderfully illusionistic the artist is. But that's a broken bit of paper under a broken magnifying glass. He's really telling you that things don't last. A little bit like Dutch still life paintings in the 1600s. They're always reminding you that life is short, things don't last. And that's really what this is about too. Down at the bottom is that envelope with the artist's signature on it as part of the address, and it says New Haven, which was his hometown. And there's a tintype photograph, again painted, of the artist by him. Look at the way that envelope, the letter that's coming out of the envelope, you can see it's that really thin paper that you used to write MLM letters on, because you can see the writing at the back faintly coming through. Things were changing, though, in America, and the cities were growing, and some people were getting rich enough to have more disposable income, and there were entertainments that they could go to. These are people on the roof of Hammerstein had 2 theaters in, what's the big square in New York where all the theaters are? Times Square, thank you. Times Square. But he put, for the summer, he built a roof garden so that they could still go to the theater in the summer. They didn't have air conditioning back then, but up on the roof it was okay. There were new elevators that took people up to the roof. There's new electric light that lit the scene. There are tightrope walkers here. The summer shows are a bit like summer movies, trashy but fun. You've got mermaids in tanks and things like that. And down below, there's the ringleader. And there are the people who, in the audience. The men and the women are mixed up. Not in their separate boxes. It's a well, the women, in a way, are walking a tightrope of their own between the old mores that were much more restrictive and the new, much freer ones. They could go shopping in Fifth Avenue. See the changes. No carriages now. These are automobiles going down Fifth Avenue. It was the center of the commercial America, the richest city in the richest land, where there were skyscrapers. If you look in the distance, there's the Flatiron Building. There were department stores. The population of New York had more than doubled in 20 years. And there were a lot of poor, particularly the immigrants that were swarming into both America and up to the city from other places. They, if they wanted fresh air, they didn't go to the theater. They went to the roof of their tenement buildings. But they did, the local hardware store did provide fans by the look of it. No privacy up there. You're up with the washing. John Sloan loved to show what looked like voyeuristic pictures of America, as if he was looking through the windows of the tenements. Here's a woman sitting on a rocking chair. She's reading the women's page, something new in the newspapers, as women were coming into the cities to work in the department stores or the factories. I don't think she could get into a dress like the one the model is wearing. She looks a little slovenly too. She's got washing still not finished. She's got her stockings hanging in the window. And she's paying no attention to the kid who seems to be teasing the cat in the background. The city could be a busy place, but it also could be a very lonely place. Do you ever feel lonely in a crowd? Here's a night scene by Edward Hopper, one of the famous American paintings of this cafe. 3 people in it, their shoulders hunched over. They're all in their own worlds, aren't they? The woman's playing with a book of matches. The man next to her smoking a cigarette, but they're not even looking at each other. It's not an inviting scene. That eerie green light, neon lights had just been invented in the early 1840s, so they were brand new. We're not even invited into that place. There's that big plate glass window, but there's no door to invite us in. Because things were a little bit different, as you probably remember 5 years ago. We didn't even get inside or able to meet people during COVID. Sorry. Other artists came back wanting to show their America. Charles Sheeler was interested in the machinery of America. Here are the grain elevators near his native Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And he's come back with those slashing lines like the Cubists were painting in France. We're looking over the roofs of low houses to those tall grain elevators. He calls it My Egypt. I don't think he's mocking it. I think he's celebrating the power of those grain elevators, just like the power of the pyramids in ancient Egypt. Grant Wood even manages to get America into the title of his works. He too came back from Paris, wanting to paint the American Midwest. And he's found that neo-Gothic house in Eldon, Iowa, and staged his 2 models in front of it, the man holding a hay fork. That and the embroidery on his coveralls kind of matches the lines on the Gothic window of the building. They Well, when people saw this, the people of the locals from Iowa, they were very unhappy. They thought he was mocking their out of dateness in calling it Gothic. They thought that he was mocking their narrow mindedness by their very narrow faces. One farm wife even came over, said she was going to come over to hit him over the head with her frying pan. She was that cross. The urban sophisticateds thought he was mocking the people too, their old-fashioned, strict morals, and they liked it for the very same reasons the others disliked it. But ideas began to change, actually, as the Depression got worse in America. People looked at this more in terms of the American than the Gothic, and they began to think of people in the Midwest as stoic, as strong, as determined. They were going to get through it all. And this became one of the most popular paintings in America. I thought you might like to see the models for it. This was the artist dentist who really did look just like that. This was Grant Wood's sister, because he felt he could never find a woman who would agree to have herself painted with that. But his sister said she would agree. She was cross, though, because everyone assumed she was the wife, whereas the man was old enough to be her father, and she was married to somebody else. They came in 1942. That same year, another artist, the photographer, did his view of American Gothic. Here's Gordon Parks. He just arrived in Washington, employed by the Farm Security Bureau. So this is Ella Watson, the custodian at the Bureau, with her implements, her broom and her mop, in front of a big American flag. When he arrived, Roy Stryker, who had hired him, told him, before you start work, just go around the city and take a look. And he went around the city, discovered he couldn't go into that restaurant, he couldn't go to the movies. Washington was still, in 1942, a segregated city. And he came back into the Bureau and saw Ella and took her picture. Things changed, though, particularly after the First World War, when American veterans, black veterans, came back full of pride in their accomplishments in the war, and having seen Paris and Rome, where jazz was popular. And because of the Great Migration, I'll talk about in a minute with another picture, there were a lot of Black Americans in the cities. And in Harlem in particular, there was a big renaissance of culture and ideas. The Harlem Renaissance was something that Augusta Savage was part of. She was one of the teachers. She was a sculptor. And she's doing probably the first sculpture of a little black boy looking like a little black boy. It was her nephew, Ellis Ford. And I see kids like this he's got a look of curiosity, innocence as he's looking up with his bebop hat. But Jacob Lawrence came with his parents as part of that great migration from the South. A little bit after, the Depression ended the Harlem Renaissance. But he was taught by, among others, Augusta Savage, who we just saw. So he's painting 60 paintings of that great migration that his parents were part of, and he as a child was part of. And this is the very first one of the 60, where you see all the people going to the trains, to the different cities up north. He paints very simple figures. They almost look like flat paper cutouts in bright colors, interesting shapes. And he's actually organized it so he does the same color in each of the paintings, so they work together. His first paintings were about why they left the South, the poverty, the boll weevil that's took away jobs in the cotton fields, and so did the new machinery, the discrimination. Um, but the last one that he shows is that he gives it a long title, that if people hadn't left before, they left when there was a lynching in their town. It's a very simple picture, just a branch, a noose, a huddled figure grieving. You don't need the jeering crowds. You don't need anything else, do you? It's powerful in its simplicity. And then he shows what it's like up north, that you had better schools, that you could vote. But there's still discrimination of different types. And he shows the restaurant with the yellow boundary between the black people and the white people. Look at the shapes he gets with that figure in the front. Roy Stryker is hiring people to document conditions in the Dust Bowl, in the Great Depression, for the New Deal, to show people who aren't involved, who haven't been hurt as much as others, just what was happening. He hired Dorothea Lange in California, and she talks about how she was coming home one day and saw a sign to a pea picker's field. When she got to the field, there were a lot of sort of straggled people and tents. This is just a fabric attached to the chassis of a car. The pea crop had frozen, so there was no work for the people when they got to the camp. And here's the woman with 3 children, the 2 older ones burying their heads in her shoulder, and the little one in front. The kids are dirty. The mother's only 32, but you can see how much she has gone through. When the photograph was published in the newspaper, people from San Francisco sent help to the people at the camp. Another thing that was done to employ artists during the Great Depression was painting frescoes, painting walls. And this is one that Thomas Hart Benton was commissioned to do the history of his native Missouri in the state capitol. So I'm showing you this wall where you've got the wagon trains coming, you've got the fur trader exchanging whiskey for furs with the Native American. In the middle, you've got the river and the river boats, the steamboats, and Jim and Huck Finn on the raft. I think I get it a bit closer. On the right, you've got somebody cutting trees, a black man carrying logs. And if you look behind him, up a bit, there's a slave market. And up behind the slave market, there's a church and a baptism scene in the river near the church. Thomas Hart Benton's an artist who's got a very distinctive style. It's very wavy. There's energy all over the painting. The war changed things too, the Second World War. Some of you might have heard me talk about Rockwell before, but you can't leave him out of the history of America because he really pictured it. And here's the women who go into the factories. Rosie the riveter. She's got her riveting gun on her knee. She's got her feet in all-American loafer shoes on a rather tattered copy of Hitler's Mein Kampf. She has her visor back, so it almost looks like a halo, and she's front of American flag. I brought the picture on the cover because I'm showing you images. The real things are what you should really look at. So come down to the museum. So the colors look a little bit different in 2 of these. Norman Rockwell was a very serious artist. He knew a lot about former art. He used it in his work. And in this case, he's taken Rosie's pose from a painting by Michelangelo on the Sistine Chapel ceiling of Isaiah. The only difference is that Isaiah isn't eating a ham sandwich. She's got dirt on her face and on her brawny arms, but you can see all her red curls are absolutely in place. She's got lipstick and nail varnish and a little lace handkerchief and a compact coming out of her pocket. So even working, she's still a feminine woman. He also did the four freedoms that Roosevelt spoke about. The most famous one being this, isn't this everybody's ideal Thanksgiving? He's showing you an ordinary American Thanksgiving as a way of showing how picturing freedom. How do you picture freedom from want? Well, here you've got the old couple bringing in that great big turkey. But all the young people, they're not even looking at the turkey. They're still talking to each other. They know they're going to get a big meal. They aren't hungry. The old people have understood it a bit more seriously. But the table is set with all the best things. And they've even left a space for us here. Unlike that cafe, we're invited in. The man over there is talking to us. That's, by the way, Norman Rockwell himself. So how does this one show America? It's a huge painting. Its scale kind of shocked people at the time. So did the fact that it doesn't seem to have a subject. It's a big mess. And the way he's painting it is not how you are supposed to paint either. His teacher actually was Thomas Hart Benton, the one who did the fresco in Missouri. This has that same all-over movement, all-over energy. It's expressing some of the energy of America after the war. He hasn't got money. He buys house paint, and house paint drips. It's not much good for painting on an easel. But you can fling it, you can drip it, you can make a whole web of different looks from it. I could only take pictures at the very bottom because I'm not very big. And this is just one part of the bottom of the picture. And here's another one, totally different. The CIA maybe didn't appreciate this art. I doubt if they did. But they understood that this was an art who spoke of America, America's energy, America's creativity, and most of all, America's freedom, that you could paint like this. Very different from what the Soviets were doing in their realistic, you have to show happy pictures of kids presenting flowers to dear Stalin. America had become the center of the art market now, and new patrons wanted new kinds of art, and the artists gave it to them. Well, here's America. Clearly, it's an American flag, but it's not a painting of an American flag. It's not on a flagpole waving in the wind. In fact, you couldn't put this one on a flagpole waving in the wind. It's a handmade, quite difficult to make, on a wooden surface that's got fabric glued to it, and then bits of newspaper stuck on with that, with melted wax. And then the paint itself is pigment color in melted wax. So you kind of see through to some of the newspapers underneath. It is a flag. It's an object in its own right. And it's a popular object, something ordinary people can understand. In England, they started an art form that got called pop art because it reflected popular culture. Well, that was quintessentially American. And the artist who's the quintessential painter of pop art is Andy Warhol. Here he's doing rows and rows of Coca-Cola bottles. Is he commenting on our consumer society? He says, you always have to think about what artists say and sometimes take it with a pinch of salt, but he said pop art is about liking things. What is so wonderful is that the president in the White House, the bum on the corner of the street, they drink the same can of Coke. You can't get a better can of Coke. You'll notice that these aren't all identical. In fact, they're all slightly different. We have a lot of things we can shop for. This woman's got Purina dog chow, chocolate chip cookies, TV dinners. It's not a painting, it's not a photograph. Well, it's a photograph, but it's a photograph of a sculpture. Dwayne Hansen does these. He takes molds from real people, models them, produces them in a polystyrene, paints them to look absolutely like flesh, put the hair in a strand at a time, dresses them in real clothes, and the things in the buggy itself is real. They're tremendously real. So here we've got this woman who's a little overweight. She's wearing clothes that don't exactly flatter her, too short a skirt, a run in her stockings. She's got curlers in her hair. I don't think we see people like that anymore. In fact, Dwayne Hansen studied at Cranbrook. I don't think he saw people like that around here. He went down to Florida afterwards. He calls them tacky but likable. And again, there's America changing. Here's Norman Rockwell commemorating for Look magazine, his first work for them, the first day of integrated schools in Louisiana in November 1960, when Ruby Bridges was the first child in New Orleans to go to a previously all-white school. And she had to be escorted by US Marshals. We're kind of seeing it from her point of view. The marshals are so tall, you don't even see their heads. But there she is marching along, ignoring all the horrible taunts that are being shouted at her, that you've kind of got written on the wall here, or the things that are being thrown at her. Norman Rockwell's chosen tomatoes, I think because they looked like blood. All the white parents, of course, left as soon as she got to the school. One teacher stayed to teach her for the rest of the year. And she faced demonstrations periodically the whole year. There she is, actually in photographs, the real Ruby Bridges going to school. But I also brought you the real Ruby Bridges grown up in the White House with President Obama, looking at the painting of someone modeling for her as a child. As the 20th century goes on, the people who had been left out of the art world begin demanding their place in it and doing things that were very different from the art of other people. Joan Quick-to-See Smith was brought up on a reservation. She's painting this, and at the 500th anniversary, the quincentennial, I guess, no, is that right? Or no, yeah, the semi-quin, but this is the 500th. So I think, is it the quincentennial? Anyway, it was the anniversary of Christopher Columbus coming to America. She calls him the first tourist. She always says that people accept things much more when you put a little sugar with it or a little humor with it. So she's showing the canoe, the birch bark canoes that are so typical of the trading ways of Native Americans. She's got images from newspapers and magazines that talk about or picture Native Americans, but she's kind of painted abstract paint all over it. But hanging up there for real, are the sort of objects that are the tacky tourist things that you can buy that have nothing to do with Native Americans in terms of their art. They're not made, they're probably made in China, most of them, right? They're sort of baseball teams that have Native American names. There's a little toy tomahawk. There's beadwork. And not the real things that the Native Americans do. And similarly, Black Americans. We already saw Robert Colescott's version of crossing the Delaware. Kehinde Wiley, who's very famous now because he painted the President Obama. And this is a 10-foot square, more or less, painting in the DIA of this young kid on a rearing horse. Kehinde Wiley loved the old paintings, and when he graduated from Yale, he set up his studio in Harlem, in the hood, and asked people he saw in the streets, particularly the youth, to come in and choose an old master painting they wanted to be shown in. So this kid chose Jericho's painting of a chasseur on his horse. You don't see Black people on horseback. You don't even see ordinary people on horseback in traditional paintings. It's the important people who get to ride. The rest are mere pedestrians. So here, the idea was that, especially when the horse was rearing like that, you had command not only of the horse, but of your people, of the enemies in society. So there he is. He's got his saber. He's sitting on a leopard skin blanket saddle, but he's dressed just like the kids do, low-cut jeans, Timberlake shoes, his shoulderless T-shirt. What do you call a shoulderless T-shirt? I should know. Thank you. Yes. With an attitude, clearly. He looks as if he's in charge. And in a way, it's there to give us a double take about what hasn't been in the old paintings and what can be the future. I don't know what the future holds in terms of art, but I'm sure that American artists will go on painting America. I just hope it's the kind of America we want our grandchildren to grow up in. And given how cold it was and how appreciative I am that you came out in all this cold and snow, I brought you a picture that David Hockney did on his iPad during COVID, saying, do remember, they can't cancel the spring. The snow and the ice, they'll go, and spring will come. Thank you so much.